So today we're looking at how can we deploy technology for learning, and in doing that to improve upon development. Development in this sense, meaning the things that we do in transforming our society. We as agents of transformation, either as trainers or as government agents, the people who work in the agencies of government, departments of government, executing government policy, how can we use technology to impact the work that we do in transforming society? And this particular presentation is within the context of what we are calling the Fourth Industrial Revolution. The Fourth Industrial Revolution, as we all know, is how over time technology, information and communications technology, for example, is transforming the way we do the things that we do. So that, you use the cell phone, you use the internet, you use the computer. Together, all these instruments, these tools at our disposal, people say can be utilized in ways that can advance human civilization, human productivity, and transforming societies. So that's what the lecture is all about today. We're going to be exploring how we can deploy these technologies, these tools of technology in order to advance society. So to summarize it, so we learn. These days what we will talk about, you learn, you earn, and you lead. In other words, once you are learning, you are aiming at earning a living out of that learning, and as a result, you use that knowledge that you've acquired in order to transform by leading society. So to go to the basics, we need to ask ourselves, what is training? And I'm talking to you from GIMPA. GIMPA is the Ghana Institute of Management and Public Administration. It was established in 1961 as part of the whole transition from colonialism to independence. So Ghana, as we all know by now, was the first country in Sub-Saharan Africa to gain political independence in 1957. So by 1961, there was a need to have a specialized training institute to train people who have to execute government policy. So GIMPA was established as a joint United Nations and Ghana government project to train the top hierarchy of Ghana's public administration. So over the years, that's what we do. So part of my work as an academic is also to train. And training in that context can be said to be a planned effort by a company or by organization to facilitate employees' learning of job-related competencies. So there's this saying that we never stop learning. So one of the ways in which that manifests is continuous education through training, because we want to impact the competencies that we bring to our jobs. So wherever you find yourself, even after you got your doctorate, you've got your 2 masters, you've got your MBA, you are the CEO, you are the chief director, you still need one kind or one form of training or another in order to improve or impact your work more positively. So that's what training is all about. And that the competencies that we're talking about here, that result from this training could be knowledge. Gaining knowledge here pertaining to the work that you do, your specialized area, the skills that are needed to execute the jobs in your area, and even behavioral changes that are very critical for successful performance of your work. That is very important. So therefore, to can say that the goal of training is for the employees to master the competencies and to apply them to their day-to-day activities. So as we are all gathered here for this particular training, if at the end of the day, we all go back to our workplaces better employees in terms of the work that we do, then the people who put together this training would have been accomplishing or achieving their task. But if you live here and it's business as usual, nothing changes, nothing improves, then at the end of the day, we've wasted everybody's time, including our own precious time. And that brings me to the critical point then of just how do we navigate the Fourth Industrial Revolution. There's been a lot of talk in the literature, in public policy, in social media, in popular discourse about the fourth industrial revolution. And this fourth industrial revolution, like I said earlier, could be reduced to the use of technologically inclined devices. So like the computer, like the internet, like the cell phone, anything that has to do with informations and communications technologies. That is where we are now. If you compare our era to the previous generations of people who lived, they would have talked about different types of experiences. But today we are using technology to run our very existence. And so that is what is being, to put it briefly, the fourth industrial revolution. And we'll go into details later to talk about other types of revolution that have occurred. But our focus is the one we are calling the fourth industrial revolution. And in this type of revolution, governments, organizations, employers and employees all agree that technology that is driving this era can be a tool for advancement. And so to utilize that, you need to leverage technology in our training. So it's about linking strategic organizational goals to its objectives. We use instructional designs to process and to ensure that training becomes more effective. In other words, when you say you are utilizing or you are navigating the fourth industrial revolution, you are also saying that these devices that are driving that revolution, we are deploying them in order to facilitate the work that we do. If it's training that we're talking about, then we can use it to facilitate training, so training becomes more effective. And you are able to compare benchmarks within the organization's training programs, training programs in other organizations, because you can be able to say, because we're able to use technology more widely or more frequently or more effectively, then we are doing something that others are not doing. So others can also say the same about you if they are using more technology to achieve their set objectives and goals. So at the end of the day, all we're saying is that how can we take advantage of where we find ourselves in this fourth industrial revolution to create conditions, working conditions that encourage continuous learning, continuous education, so that at the end of the day, we are not only educating ourselves, which is very important, but even more importantly, in transforming our organizations, our societies, our communities, and the country as a whole. And so that means continuous learning has become part and parcel of our, today's way of life. So it's a way of responding to change. If you want to be a change agent, then you might yourself be responding to the changes happening around you. And one of the ways by which we respond to change is through continuous learning. You never stop learning until your years on this earth are spent. So it requires employees to understand the entire work system, including relationships between or amongst their jobs, their work units, and their company. You can't work in an organization when you are so detached from the goals and the objectives of the organization. So for example, if you are all employees of the government of South Africa, then one of the things that I probably will challenge you on is the government's Agenda 2030, which is the big government agenda for the government. So this current administration is aiming that they should be able to help accomplish that. But the question then becomes, what is the role of the government employees? All of us here, what are our role in achieving the set agenda of transforming this country, of achieving the targets? Because we each have a role to play if government is to succeed. Because who is government? Government is not somebody sitting somewhere. Government is you and I who are charged with certain responsibilities, certain roles that we have to play towards the attainment of the set goals that the government has set itself, that we all have set ourselves. So if we think that continuous learning is an avenue of achieving that, then that's where we have to invest our energies. And that means that we are not just doing training for the sake of training. There are some people, training becomes an avenue for them to get away from their workspaces, for them to get out of town, to come to beautiful Port Elizabeth, go to other parts of the country, just to catch up with old friends. It's like a holiday. No. Training, yes, of course, we are human beings. Once in a while, we need to get away from our immediate environment. We need to get away from the stresses and the demands of our everyday work. But more importantly, training can be continuous learning. And that's also a way of responding to change. Because the things that are constant, or that is constant, is change. So they say the only thing constant is change. Change is constant. Change is happening every day. And how do we respond to that? And one of the ways by which we can respond to that is through continuous learning. But before you can embark on that continuous learning, for it to benefit the organization, it means that you need to first of all understand what is your role in the organization. How does your role relate to the roles of other people who work in the organization? What are the relationships that exist between your job, other people's jobs, and the needs and the expectations of the organization as a whole? It is only when you are able to address this that we can begin to see the need for continuous learning. And one of the ways in which you can also respond to that change through continuous learning is through training. Training not for the sake of training. And like I always say, we all have our own ideas about training, but training that is effective is the one that is not just a getaway, it's not just a holiday. Of course, we all once in a while would like to get away from our immediate environment, from the work environment, to go elsewhere, to brainstorm, to re-energize, and then come back even more effective. But before we can even embark upon a training, we need to first and foremost understand or investigate, research into the training needs. And training needs here, you can put them into two. There are two types of training needs. The first one is about the individual's training needs. In other words, what are the training needs of the individual employee? Because if the individual is the agent for or of transformation, then his training needs must also be looked at. Then after that, what about the organization? So there has to be a synergy between individuals' training needs on one hand and organizations' training needs on the other hand. Once we have ensured that we understand what these training needs are, then you are able to design a training program that will meet the needs of the individual and by extension the needs of the organization. Then you can help to facilitate that knowledge sharing. Because when at the end of the day you acquire the training that you are supposed to acquire, how do you use that training to impact the organization? Not all of us can go to a training at one point or at the same venue. Once in a while, some group of people will go for training, like as we are here now. Not everybody is here from our organizations, because life must go on, the organization must run. So when you get back to work, how do you impact the organization? By sharing the knowledge that you've acquired. That's very important. That's the only way training can become more effective. And that will result, so there's this thing about the learning and the development cycle. Because it is believed that when learning takes place, it leads to transformation. So development here can be seen as a way of transformation. They are interdependent. You learn in order to improve. So this cycle, or the learning and development cycle, is composed of interrelated components that are the steps of a systematic process, usually starting from identifying the study needs. So like I said, first of all, you have to identify the needs, the study needs or the training needs. Then you are going to continue, and then the process will end with assessing the learning needs and evaluating the training. Because after you've acquired the training or the learning, then you have to evaluate how that learning or that training is impacting the individual trainee and the organization at large. And it is therefore it's a continuous improvement. It's a continuous improvement both in terms of the training process and also in terms of the professional development of the trainees. It continues. The individual going through the training is improving himself and by extension the organization. And then the knowledge that is acquired should eventually or should ultimately result in change. So with time, your job requirements, the time that you spend in the training has to impact the job that you do. So by so doing, technology, if that is the tool that you use to acquire the training, then that technology would have been serving a good need or a purpose for the organization. So this is how it is reduced. So you can see the reduction of that into this map here, where it captures the various things that are interconnected and interdependent in order to ensure that learning and development are complementing each other, all geared towards attaining the goals of transforming the organization. So when that happens, then the question we ask is, what are the outcomes? What are the benefits? What are the end benefits, so to speak, of training? And that will only be known through evaluation. So that's why evaluation now has become one of the critical aspects of public policy. That to know the effectiveness of policy has to be evaluated. If you don't evaluate the policy against the set objectives or goals of the policy, then you wouldn't know how effective the policy has been. So for learning to result in transformation, the learning or the training that has been undertaken has to be evaluated. So by so doing, there should be emphasis on certain things. So for example, how does the training help in providing educational opportunities for all employees, for example? And how does that result in improvement in ongoing processes, so that it's not just a one-time, one-off situation or development, because it has to be continuous. Then the executives and the managers and other trainees that benefit have to see improvement in the work that they do. If you are a manager, you are the line manager, how does your training in people's management, for example, is resulting in more employer-employee relationships? How does your work as a manager is advanced or is improved because of the training? So training in that way becomes a tool for achieving the strategic goals, because every organization has a strategic goal that needs to be achieved. So for the government of South Africa, the strategic goal in this case will be Agenda 2030. If at the end of the day we all achieve what is set up in that agenda, then the government, as the organization that we work for, as our employer, would have been achieving its strategic goal, and our training, including the one we are doing here, would have been more beneficial and useful to the organization. So these are the things that happen. Through learning, we acquire skills, we become mentors, we become leaders, and we lead organizations, and so on and so forth. So it's a multiplicity of things that result as a result of the training, or as because we have undertaken this training. So over the past couple of years, there have been some changing trends or development in when it comes to learning and development. Continuously or increasingly, we are seeing the development of specialized training, where training is targeting certain individuals or certain aspects of their work. So maybe the skill that you need to acquire is people's management, is emotional intelligence, it is about how do you manage your emotions, how do you manage stress, because when you are stressed, that can impact the organization more negatively. How do you multitask? How do you work with less supervision? Because in a more technological environment, we are eliminating this type of the old way of doing things, where there's somebody supervising 24/7. Over time, we should be able to work with less supervision and still achieve maximum results. So increasingly, we are seeing the rise in specialized training, where we are targeting certain aspects, certain skill sets that employees need to acquire. And some also are industry specific. Depending on the industry, if you are in customer service, for example, then the training that is required there is effective customer service or customer satisfaction or service delivery. Because if the customers are not satisfied with the service that we are delivering for them, then that can have implications for the organization. So that may be the training. So that's a specialized training. Then people increasingly are talking about how if you deploy technology, then learning can be paced at our speed levels or at our time and choosing. So learning is individualized. So that it's not wholesale, it's not mass production, it's not one size fits all. So I decide what training I want to do. If I'm doing it through online facilities, then I do it at my own pace. I can pause and continue later. So that way training is also happening at my own pace. It's not imposed as it used to be. So technology-based learning is becoming a way of ensuring quality training and learning that benefits the trainee and also the organization using technology. And so we are seeing that the numbers, the percentages of services that are distributed through external providers has dropped drastically because organizations are no longer depending on external bodies to train their employees for them. So we are saying that from 2007 to 2015, we've seen 12% drop in the nature of external training facilities that are available to employees. And that is going to even continue to drop because organizations are developing in-house training based or in-house based learning because it's more cost effective to have in-house. So like what we are doing now, assuming that we are sending everybody here to the UK, to France, to Canada, to the US for training, think about the cost of buying tickets. Think of the cost of facilitation. Think about the risk. But if we are doing it in-house, then what happens is that we are going to only pay for facilitators. If it's one facilitator, we pay for him or her. If it's 3, 4, we pay for them. And then we train a huge number of people in-house. So whilst we are even training, break time, you can still go to the office and get some work done. So we are maximizing time. We are also making sure that we're cutting cost because cost is very important when it comes to the public sector. So increasingly over time, we've seen the development of in-house training because that is the way to go using technology. And so that brings to the next question of what are these new technologies? Because like we said, we are now in an age called the 4th Industrial Revolution where we are using new technologies that are novel, that are new. So these technologies are being used to deliver training and to make training more realistic. Because when we use technology, then we can say training could occur at any time, at any place. You don't have to take everybody to Ghana, to Gimpa. You don't have to take everybody to NSG offices in Pretoria. Training can be brought home to us at the comforts of our homes, in our offices, wherever we find ourselves, training can be delivered. So that is through the use of technology. Like what I'm doing to you, giving to you now in form of this lecture. I'm in Ghana, I'm in West Africa, I'm in Gimpa, and I'm able to do this delivery using technology. All I need is to have my PowerPoint or my PC. I have these gentlemen who are the technicians who use the audio and then the video systems, and we are having training. So when we do that, training is in-house, is cost effective, and it even enables us to be able to assess the abilities and the competencies of the people who are providing. We are able to compare, because if today one particular provider of the training is not effective, then next time around we are going to look for another expert. So that way we are not going to repeat the mistakes that we think happened in the previous training. We are not able to do that in a traditional training context where you take the people to the classroom, they are trained by one person, whether the program is good or bad, it has to continue. But this one you are able to evaluate because it's in-house, so you determine who you bring in. But if you are going to be sending the people to a trainer, then you can only make propositions or proposals or recommendations as to whether they will be taken on board is another thing. So increasingly through the use of technology, we are able to maximize the opportunities that are available to our employees. And companies, organizations are also able to use alternative work kind of arrangements, so that we can say next week this group of people will go for training, another week, so that we don't deplete the organization if everybody. We can do a rotational arrangement, because a group of people go for the training, and then another time another group does that, because the technology is available to do that for us. So we talk about technology enabled training. Well, yes, you're still going to have a human factor. Human beings are going to be delivering, but they are doing that more and more using technology. So technology is driving the training through the use of the tools that are available to us provided by technology. So that begs the question, why this type of training? Why technology-based training? Well, the simple answer is that as society develops, information is becoming centralized. Information is becoming central to the way that we do things. And our everyday lives are being impacted by the processes of information and communication technologies. And information is very crucial to development of people and their communities. People need information to find ways of meeting their needs, access basic services like water and healthcare. All these things are done through the use of information. Therefore, as information becomes available, then we are using that information to improve the way we do things that we do on an everyday basis. So it means that we need to begin to ask the question, how can we impact in high volumes through the use of training? Can people perform better because they are doing training? So the argument is that in the use of technology is enabling the learning, then of course people are going to benefit more, and that benefit is going to trickle down to society and to the organization as such. So what is technology then? And that is very basic. You see, so we consider technology the science and the art of getting things done through the application of skills and knowledge. So and that will take us to different types of technology. Any tool, any science, any knowledge that enables you to get things done. So that's technology. We can talk about different types of technology, but all we are saying is that when societies are transforming by getting to do the same things more efficient or more effectively, and that is being done through the use of certain devices, then we say technology is helping us to do that. Then we are benefiting from technology. So technology is serving our everyday purposes. Think about it. Today we still travel, and I tell people that when we say we live in a globalized world, that's being driven by transport, by information and communication technologies. It doesn't mean that human beings have never been traveling. Human beings have traveled, they've communicated, they've used cell phones, and they've used the telephone, not cell phone, the telephone. But the ways in which we do those things, the same things today, are so different. Think about it. People used to travel maybe from Southern Africa to Western Africa, but think about how many days it would take them if they were walking or if they were using the sea, the high seas. Today, technology has advanced in terms of modern transportation. So the same things that they used to do many years ago, they still continue to do them, but this time it's being facilitated through the use of technology. And as a result, even the social science, so with the social scientists, we are also saying that we have looked at the interaction between technology and society using different prisms, different perspectives. So, and that's what we do as researchers. We researchers, we look at the benefits of technology to society. So some will talk about technology and society, or society and technology, or technology and society playing having complementarity in terms of the roles that they play. And that is one of the intellectual debates, is whether or not technology is serving society, or a society that is serving technology. So we talk about technology determinism. So while some will argue that it's technology that drives society, and that society is just responding to technology. So our lives are being shaped by technology and not the other way around. It's debatable. It's a perspective. So the idea that technology began technology and the society is continuously being transformed in the wake of this process, so that we move from one use of technology to another. So many years ago, electrical power was the newest thing. Today, we are talking about information and communications technology. So one technology leads to another civilization, another revolution in technology, and society responds to that as it occurs. So an example of that is how societies have changed through the use of the Pentecostal movement, for example. And people say the Pentecostal movement that occurred would not have been possible if there was no new technology to print more Bibles. So the printing press emerged as a new technology that we can now produce Bibles in high volumes using technology. And as a result of that, the Bible is not limited to only few people who could have access. You can print more. Today, you can, even in the palm of your hand, be able to read the Bible. And because we are using technology. That way of looking at technology and society, that as societies try to catch up with technology, then technology is transforming that society. So the example about the printing press and how it resulted in the print of more Bibles, and as a result, more people have access to the gospel. That's one way of looking at technology and society. The other way of doing that is what's called the social construction or social constructivism. This one considers social interactions as having primacy in terms of development and the use of tools. Thus, on the one hand, the tools may be intended originally for a certain purpose, but with time society is able to fine-tune, is able to modify that tool to serve another purpose. So society is the one that is mastering technology, not the other way around. So technology is socially constructed. So the uses to which you put a particular technology is based on that society. So for example, if you look at it, the tractor that is used on the farm was originally intended to use to plow the fields. So as human beings begin to think about huge production and they want to move away from the use of basic tools, the cutlass and the hoe to produce, then they invented the tractor. So the original purpose of the tractor is to plow the fields. But over time, people even begin to use the tractor as a form of transport. So it means that society is improvising. So in that regard, we can argue that it is not technology that is driving society, but society is modifying technology to suit its needs. So that's social construction of technology. But no matter how we look at it, we can all agree that technology has certain role to play in our society, in impacting societies. And according to the UN Development Program, technology can be used for human development. And that human transformation can be made more possible, more attainable through the use of technology. So people's incomes can improve through the use of technology. So for example, these days, people don't have to go far off to make exchanges. If you have some goods you want to sell, all you have to do is to put them on Instagram, put them on Facebook, put them on your DP, your Facebook DP. People will call you, and then you have someone to deliver them for you. So the use of technology is making life easier. People are able to communicate. They resolve problems through the use of cell phones, through the use of the internet. People have meetings through the use of the internet rather than having to travel long distances. I'm able to do the presentation I'm doing now from my base at Gimpa in Ghana instead of traveling all the way to South Africa, to Port Elizabeth. Of course, I would have loved to be there, but if circumstances beyond my control have conspired to make sure that I'm not there physically, that should not be the end of the story. All I have to do is to look for the appropriate technology, then we are all in business. So one of the ways in which we can actually begin to relate closely to technology, particularly in this era of the fourth industrial revolution, is to compare the industrial age. We compare that with the information age. Because once upon a time, the industrialization in Western Europe actually marked a turning point in human civilization, where you see huge transformations in Western capitalist societies, which were largely agrarian, rural societies, but which, as a result of the Industrial Revolution, began to witness transformations, and today we are all the beneficiaries of that investment in the Industrial Revolution. People are saying the same thing about the present age, that if we do it properly, future generations will look back and then be grateful to what we achieved. And if you look at that, the revolutions that are taking place, you can see that you can reduce them to what happened. So you look at the Industrial Revolution, you look at production, the tools that were driving production during the Industrial Revolution was energy, steam, and electrical machines were being used to transform production processes. Today, the tools that we are using, information communication technologies. The press of the button, you can make huge financial transactions. The screen of your computer in your office can expose you to all kinds of audiences all over the world. So the production processes are being transformed through the use of information and communication technologies. And the products, so in the industrial age, the things that were being produced are the products that are coming. So that the major unit or component in terms of the production process was the various products. Today, the main focus for us is service. The service sector is the target of the ICT revolution. The things that we are doing using technology are translating more in the service sector. Then, when you look at the Industrial Revolution, it led to the organized labor, because as human beings move away from subsistence farming and production processes to work in the industry, in the firm, they have to organize themselves as organized labor in order to champion their concerns, their welfare needs. Today, it's becoming individualized. People come to the workplace, certain skills. So if you interview people, you look at what skills they have, and you pay them or you compensate them based on their skills. So increasingly, labor is individualized. So we are witnessing a gradual drop or diminishing of the organized labor model, which used to be the very important part of the way societies were run or were organized. Workers' movement. In the United Kingdom, the Labour Party actually became effective because the Workers' Party, it became the mouthpiece for the workers in order to be able to have their bargaining power, they are able to have their welfare concerns addressed by the state. We need to also look at what constitutes these ICTs that we are talking about, because if you are going to be using them as instruments for training and learning and transformation, then you have to kind of be abreast with what these things, what constitutes these things that we are talking about. So when we say information and communication technology, we are saying that these are the tools or the instruments or the processes that define our modern world. And ICTs here encompass both the equipment and the services that they facilitate. So you take the computer, the laptop, the cell phone, it's both the equipment. So this is our equipment. Then the things that we do with them, so you use the cell phone to communicate, to make calls. You use the laptop to process your Word document and to share your document with other people. So when you say ICTs, we're talking about both the equipment and the service that they actually facilitate. So computers are part of the technologies. And then the communications part, the telecommunications are the cellular phone, the cell phone that we use, and then the landlines that we use. Then the audiovisual. So we're talking now about the DVDs, the cameras, the MP3 players, and etc. These are all part. Then broadcasting. So you go to the broadcasting, so the radio and television. All these together are the things that we are saying are the ICTs. And they are the ones that are facilitating our way of life in the present era. So the equipment themselves, that's the hard part of it. So the things, without them, there cannot be any service provided. And we cannot be service provided without them also. So complementarity in terms of the equipment and the service that they facilitate. And we argue that the reason these tools are becoming the avenues that are becoming our very way of life is the flexibility that they afford. So you look at the dichotomy between flexibility and control. And you argue that people find ICTs, or we all find ICTs to be more flexible, easier to use, they empower us. And then it means that we can use them at our individual paces, we have greater access, and so there are different kinds of information that can be accessed depending on what you want. So it gives that flexibility. It's not like somebody sitting there controlling how much information you can. Of course, certain societies have their own arrangement of how to manage these things, but all we are saying that the individual seems to be more in control of the use of these type of technology than other forms of technology that we've been used to. And you can also be used, the ICTs can be used in order to control or to control what the employees are doing, because they increase managers' span of control. In other words, managers are also able to control the employees through the use of ICTs. For example, so like the Big Brother. In the olden days, for example, if you talk about people like Michel Foucault, who talk about prison, so the Panopticon in the 16th century, for example, was an instrument of control, where all the prison guard has to do is the way the architecture of the prison is designed, in a way that the prisoner will think that he's being watched, even when nobody's watching him. That's like the Big Brother. The same way today, most managers can go to sleep knowing that they can monitor their employees through the use of, they can use technology to record your movement, to monitor you. At the end of the day, they just play it back to themselves and they know what had happened. They can go back to look at your performance online, the site that you visited whilst you are doing your job. So it also, in a way, on the one hand, it gives the employees that flexibility to use technology the way they want to use it. On the other hand, it empowers the employer to also have control. The employer doesn't lose control because the employees are having flexibility in using technology. However, before we can begin to see how we can deploy technology to facilitate the work that we do, we have to also recognize certain barriers. I mean, this presentation I'm making, it is taking, I mean, now it will seem so effortless. But if I were to tell you all the challenges I have to confront and surmount, then you begin to see that sometimes it's not as easy. So there are barriers to the effective use of ICTs. Well, some can argue that the same applies to any other form of device or technology. So yes, if you have to use these technologies to transform as tools for learning and training, then you have to look at the technology. So the major source is the disparity. So that we talk about the digital divide. There are disparities in the use of technology depending on how you find yourself. So people talk about the global north and the global south divide. So they talk about the digital divide, that in the global north, technology usage is easier, is common, the internet is cheaper, is flexible, the infrastructure for technology is more available to more people, it's user-friendly, it's easier to use. And the barriers to the use of those ICTs are less in the more advanced economies. And in other places, the barriers, and for example, barriers such as the high cost to procure the equipment So let's say the laptop, the cell phone, the audio visual, and then the other machines, and then the equipment that you need, they don't come cheap. So depending on your income levels, your ability to spend, if you are a poor developing country where you have budgetary constraints all the time, your investment in those technologies are going to be low compared to countries where they have a lot extra money to spend. So yes, the cost, lack of education, and the insufficient motivation. In certain societies, people are not motivated. People want to do is business as usual. So we hear government trying to give one laptop to every school-going kid. When it looks fantastic, but for you to be able to motivate it to do that, you have to do other considerations. Is there available electrical power? So I've always argued that if Africa, for example, we want to own the present technologies, then we have to begin to see how we can utilize it to our advantage. But for example, developing equipment that can run on solar. Because you can't give laptops to school kids in rural Africa when the parents are now struggling to look for money to get electrical power. But if we were to have a solar-inspired or solar-driven equipment, cell phone or computer, it means that Africa, we are making an inroad in the ownership of the patent to the hardware. As it is now, we are just consuming. And even that is mediated by our ability to afford. So that brings to affordability. So even if the equipment, the ICT equipment are commonplace, is an issue for affordability. How many Africans, how many people in our countries are able to afford the equipment that we are talking about? So affordability can be a huge barrier to our ability to use these ICTs. Then the skills. So there's a different skill set that come with the use of these technologies. If you go to some societies, these things are used seamlessly. You go to primary schools, high schools, children are at very early age exposed to these things. So they have the skills to be able to manage and maneuver these technologies, these ICTs. Then I talked earlier about the motivation. Societies have to be motivated. So the older the population, the less motivated they are. There are people who say, I was born before these technologies. I'm not now going to go back to school to learn. I mean, it's for the younger generation. So you see that you take the public bus, you see the younger population on their phone playing and WhatsApping and doing Instagram and doing Facebook. And the older generation, they cannot be bothered. So it means that there's a generational, gap when it comes to the use of ICT. The older the population, the less interested they are, or that population is in applying these ICTs. So people say it's a young people's revolution. So the question then is, we talked earlier about how do you use technology for development, and that we say that technology, if properly applied, can facilitate development. So ICTs can be assessed. So the ability to access the ICTs in itself, the starting point. Then how do you apply the content? Then you build the necessary skill set of the people. Once there's accessibility, that is, you're able to afford and have access to the technology, then people's skills can be built. People can acquire certain skill sets through the use of the technology. Then they can begin to use that to transform societies where they find themselves. So in a nutshell, we are integrating the ICT usage to the demands and the needs of society. So we talk about the benefits to the learning, etc. And we talk about this already, that for the use of ICT for learning to take place, then access and equity. As it is now, there are barriers to be able to access these ICTs, and then wherever you find yourself becomes a mediating factor to how much of ICT you can use. So there's no universal access. Countries that are more advanced, they own the technologies that that we are talking about, and some of us are just consuming. So the cost of accessing these tools and these technologies are higher depending on where you find yourself. And then you can be able to create a value, because if you are not the one owning, or you don't own the technology, then you don't own the content also. So at the end of the day, you can only use this for as a tool of transformation if it is available to you, and then you can use it in terms of using it to transform your society and make it as relevant as possible to the people in your society. So we talked about that. Now I just want us to move quickly to talking about other issues briefly, that if we are going to be using ICTs, then we need to have access. Access here meaning that it should be available, and access also means affordability. What is the cost of the internet? Do you have the broadband? Do you have the easy access to the internet, the Wi-Fi? Is it available? Then are people able to afford the equipment? Because you need to get the equipment. How many government agencies have the computers, the PCs that they need? So in conclusion, there's this saying that learning is becoming a prerequisite if you want to be a modern man. And they are saying that all of us, we need to learn, and that in a year we'll need, by the year 2022, which is like 2 years away from now, we'll need 101 days of learning. 101 days of learning, which means that we can't stop learning, and that technologies like ICTs, information communication technologies, are tools that are at our disposal that can facilitate our ability to learn. There are a wide range of these tools. Some we can afford, some we need to invest. But whatever the case may be, we need to utilize these technologies to advance learning. So in a nutshell, we all are obligated to explore avenues for learning, because we can never stop learning. And in an industrial revolution, the fourth industrial revolution, we need to look at the tools that are provided and be able to maximize them in order to achieve the goals that we set for ourselves as individuals, as organizations, and as a community and as a country. On that note, I thank you. And one of the things I want you to do is to design maybe a learning module. And I do this anytime I make this presentation, that you design a learning module, you break it into groups, and then you're able to use the learning module to address a specific policy need of your organization. So you've identified a policy gap or a policy need in your organization, or a learning need or a learning gap in your organization. Then you're able to tell us which particular tools of ICT will be required in order to provide the training in order to meet the need of the organization. So we can break ourselves into groups, then we have group leaders, then we can brainstorm. So take your organization, identify the training need, who are the people who require that training, and then what types of technologies that are needed in order to achieve that. We'll go around and then we'll make sure that everybody is addressing a particular training need and designing appropriate tools to address it. Thank you very much.